Hi, it's Senator Debbie Stabenow. How are you?
Good, Senator Stabenow. Jason Cooper, WFNT. Thanks for taking the time to speak with us today.
Absolutely.
Hey, a couple of quick questions before we get to the Great Lakes Protection Bill. Is that okay?
Sure.
Another horrific video released by ISIS or ISIL in which a mass beheading of Egyptian Christians was shown. Majority of Americans now in support of the use of force against ISIS or ISIL. President has asked for authority in waging war against them, a little bit lesser authority than what he currently has. Do you support the president?
Well, I absolutely believe we have to be unified against ISIL, and we're looking thoughtfully at the best language, the best way to do that. And I'm working through all of that. But there's no question that they are a horrible organization, a serious threat. I think what is very important is that the countries in the region are also engaging now. This has been a long time in coming. For so long, it was just American lives, American treasure on the line. Now the other countries are realizing that this is a threat to them. They're right there in the region. And so to see Egypt, to see Jordan, to see Saudis, to see others engaging, I think is very important if we're actually, as a whole world community, going to push back and stop this outrageous organization and what they're doing.
What about the use of ground troops? If Congress authorizes the authority, what about the use of ground troops to fight them? Because it doesn't seem like we'd need to repair an infrastructure like we had to do in Iraq. What about the use of ground troops and fighting against them?
Well, this has to be a coordinated effort between our country and other countries, and I think we have to do this in the smartest way possible. And that's something that we need to leave to the military personnel, I think, and others in the region that are working with the White House to make recommendations on. I do think, again, it's very important that it not just be Americans, and that we are in a better position if, in terms of what's happening in the Arab countries, if it is the Arab leadership leading that effort, and if we're supporting them. I think that's much more effective than just having that all on America. So it is important how this is put together. I would say also it's very important that we fully fund our homeland security. And as of February 27th, the funding stops unless our Republican colleagues in the U.S. House and Senate are willing to fund homeland security and not tie it and hold that hostage to a political fight they're having with the president on immigration. And so that's very, very important. That's 100% our responsibility, is border and customs and airports and the Coast Guard and police and fire and all of that. And we've got to make sure that we are not in any way allowing that funding to slip.
Sticking with a coalition of support that you mentioned a few moments ago, Israel's Benjamin Netanyahu has been invited to speak and address Congress. Will you go when he speaks in a couple of weeks?
Well, I'm still trying to determine that. I had other commitments already that I've made. I certainly am supportive of the great democracy of Israel, but I have to say the speaker has politicized this in a way that has never happened before in our country, and it's not in Israel's interest to have Republicans decide that they want to make this a partisan issue by not working with the President of the United States when a world leader comes to Congress. The way this has been done is really outrageous. It's never been done this way in the history of our country with Democratic or Republican presidents. Very, very unfortunate that this has been politicized, because the issues that surround his visit and that I know he cares about are very, very serious. The threat of Iran, very, very serious. And to somehow throw this in the middle of the fight between the Republican Congress and the president is really irresponsible in my judgment.
You brought up the Department of Homeland Security funding bill. Many surprised in the president's latest budget proposal without any funding for a new customs plaza in Detroit as part of the new international trade crossing, bringing things back here to Michigan. Where are we on that?
Well, certainly the Congress can include funding, and we have Congresswoman Candace Miller, who is leading efforts on Homeland Security funding in the House, and certainly that is something that could be done. But I think the fact that there are other alternatives being looked at is also very important. The Customs Plaza needs to get done. The international crossing needs to get done. I've met personally with our Canadian counterparts and the leadership there. There are a number of alternatives that are being looked at right now. And so I'm confident one way or the other that we'll be able to get that done.
Senator Stabenow, you sponsored legislation with Senator Peters to restore the health of the Great Lakes Ecological and Economic Protection Act. Tell our listeners a little bit about that.
Well, there are a number of things that we're working on that relate to the Great Lakes, and I was just newly elected as the co-chair of the Great Lakes Task Force. It's a Democrat and Republican group of everybody from the Great Lakes, which is great. Well, one bill is what you're talking about, which is the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, which President Obama really jump-started when he came in 2009. It hadn't received funding in the past, and it was dramatically increased. It was a great thing to have a Great Lakes president who understood what it meant when we say the Great Lakes. So this particular bill will extend the funding at the original level that the president funded back a number of years ago. Over the last few years, the funding's gone down. We need to get it back up, and so that's what this bill will do. Secondly, we are rolling out, in fact, today in Franklin, we're talking about the Stabenow Bay watershed, and there are 5 projects across Michigan focused on protecting our water and the Great Lakes through the Farm Bill. We have a new conservation effort that's based on community partners. Half the funding will come from the Farm Bill, half will come from community and the private sector, and a total of $80 million will be invested across Michigan to deal with runoff into the lake. So stopping excessive pesticide runoff or sediment or other erosion into the Great Lakes. This is something that our farmers are very committed to addressing, and this partnership will help them do that.
One last question. Talk a little bit about the ongoing efforts to protect the Great Lakes from Asian carp. President's recent budget, according to the Great Lakes Commission, inadequate. I'm looking at a Detroit Free Press article that says an Army Corps proposal only asks for $500,000 in the efforts to protect the Great Lakes from Asian carp. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. Probably the biggest threat at the moment, short-term threat certainly, is Asian carp. And I've been leading the efforts to push the Army Corps of Engineers. Unfortunately, it just feels like it's been pulling teeth every step of the way to get them engaged. We have put up temporary barriers at various places, identified 19 different ways these fish could get into the Great Lakes, both Lake Michigan and Lake Erie and other places. Some barriers are being put up in Indiana. There's a permanent barrier being put up. We are focused on the Illinois and Mississippi rivers because that's where the most imminent threat is going into Lake Michigan. And next week I'll be introducing bipartisan legislation that will provide the funding necessary to do what all the governors have agreed needs to be done in terms of strengthening the barriers at the point where Illinois and Mississippi rivers come together. So we have to keep moving forward. We're going to have to push it legislatively. I don't think that's going to come from the Army Corps. We're going to have to just keep pushing them. And so that's what I intend to do.
Senator Stabenow, as always, we appreciate you taking the time to speak with us and look forward to the future conversations with you.
Great. Okay. Have a good day.
Thank you. You too.